Gerald Genta is one of the most famous watch designers in the watch world. He's the mind behind the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak, the Patek Philippe Nautilus, and the Bulgari Octo. He's had a massive impact on the watch and design areas. But he didn't just design watches for other brands, he also launched his own brand, the eponymous Gerald Genta watches. And here I've got one of his watches, the Gerald Genta Night and Day GMT. It's an interesting watch with some interesting design features, which is what you would expect from someone like Gerald Genta, and it's worth going through it. And if you've got any thoughts about it, well, let me know that in the comments below, and I'll link to where you can buy these in the comments below. Now, the Gerald Genta Night and Day dates from the early 2000s. It has a rather unique aesthetic, and this permeates throughout all of the watch, and it is worth considering as a potential watch to buy. It's 36mm in diameter, so it's not massive, but it also isn't too small. So it's one of those ones that is at least an interesting curiosity. Now, in short, it is a reasonable option for those people who like Gerald Genta designs, who like interesting designs, or who like watches from iconic designers that have a place in watch history. So let's start with a bit of an unboxing. So the box is what you would expect, but it is at least a little bit different. The outside box is, well, standardish cardboard, but the box inside, well, it's this bright blue color, which isn't something that you see every day. It certainly is from the time, but it's at least a little bit unique. Now, it's lasted reasonably well in this case, given the age of the box, but of course that will depend on exactly which one you are buying. Now, inside the watch box, well, we have the watch, unsurprisingly, and we have a manual. The manual is relatively standard. It's made out of paper, but it feels sturdy enough, it feels thick, and it feels like it isn't too flimsy. No one will probably ever actually read the manual, but it's there. So focusing on the watch itself, well, the dial came in several different iterations. The one that I've got here is a white dial, but of course it came in different colors as well, which may be a personal preference for some people. I personally prefer the white dial, but again, that's just personal preference. It has a GMT complication, which you can see from the red hour hand that is on the dial here. The night and day indicator isn't a perpetual calendar, it is simply one that will go around as you are changing the time zone, telling you whether you're a night or day in the relevant time zone. It is an interesting graphic, maybe somewhat useful if you're really going across borders and really trying to communicate with people in other countries, but it's at least an interesting one to look at. And it rotates with the red secondary hour marker. Now, this is where you would keep track of whether or not it's day or night, maybe if you're a pilot or a frequent traveler, or just want something that looks interesting. Now, as I alluded to, the base time zone is in the white arrows, and the secondary time zone is denoted by the red hour marker. The dial has this inner ring that separates the hour markers from the center of the dial. It helps to draw the whole thing together to create a degree of, I'll call it textural integrity, to make it sit in a nice way. And that ring bisects the night-day indicator, and it bisects the date indicator, which is at the bottom at the 6 o'clock area, with the night-day indicator being around the 12 o'clock area. The watch itself, like I've indicated, measures about 36mm in diameter. It's a reasonable size. It is noticeably bigger than, say, a 34mm Rolex, but it's probably going to wear and feel somewhat a tiny bit smaller than the 36mm Rolex, because the 36mm often has the bracelet and starts to look larger, whereas this particular watch doesn't have a bracelet on it. Now, what I've got here is this on aftermarket blue suede strap, but from the factory it would come standard with a black leather strap. Now, I've seen some different measurements reported online, measuring it from 37 to 38mm. I've seen different reports about this. Now, when I measure it, I get 36mm. Maybe there were different iterations that I'm not aware of that came in larger sizes, but this particular one is 36mm. The case otherwise is actually really quite interesting. Not necessarily because it's a circle, but because of the sides of the case in particular. On the sides, we've got this ladder-like effect. Now, obviously that could be a bit of a magnet for dirt and grime, but it is different from what ordinary watches have. It's at least a unique appearance. The watch should at least get some points for not being the same as everyone else. The primary crown is also a little bit unusual, being more of a dome with these little dots around it for some extra grip. The secondary crown, by contrast, is more of an oblong type shape, and you press that in, with the primary crown being one that you pull out. So you've got this interesting design feature that features throughout the watch, and appears to have been not uncommon for Gerald Genta's watches when he was making them under his own brand name. Now, the movement itself is reportedly called a GA3 movement with 22 jewels. It appears to be a modified Etihad 2892. Now, this of course is a reasonably workhorse movement. It is reasonably sturdy, reasonably reliable, and used in a lot of different watches. It would be nice if there were definitely an in-house movement, but a modified Etihad 2892 is at least not bad. It's reportedly resistant up to 30 meters of water, but I suspect that if you've got the leather strap on it, you probably won't be putting it underwater, or at least I wouldn't. But it's nice that that feature exists so you can wash your hands and not feel like the watch is going to have issues. Now, the watch itself functions smoothly. It functions kind of like you would expect it to do. You pull out the crown and then you adjust the time zone or the date as need be. You push the button on the left, so the secondary crown, to adjust the red hand, which demarks the secondary time zone. And then the night-day indicator shifts around as applicable. It functions in a reasonably straightforward, reasonably ordinary manner. The watch also has some visible lume, and it is reasonably easy to see at night, except for the secondary hour, which you can't see. So whether or not that's important to you, well, it depends on how much you're actually going to use the secondary hour, but it's functional enough. Now, the watch, like I've indicated, from the factory came with either a bracelet or a black leather strap. The one that I've got here came with the strap, but of course there is a bracelet. I don't personally like the look of the bracelet. It looks a little bit odd, in my opinion. Maybe it's a unique design feature that some people might like. I just don't think it looks very good. I prefer it on a leather strap. Like I've said, this one's on a blue suede strap, but there's a black strap which came from the factory. And if we're looking at the factory strap, well, it had the Gerald Genta type logo or type insignia on the buckle, which nicely ties the whole thing together. Overall, therefore, I think the Gerald Genta Night Day is an interesting watch to consider. It's an important brand from horological history. Gerald Genta was an incredibly important designer. It's one of those rare instances where one of the designer's names became as well known as some of the watches. And when he set off and did his own brand, you had some interesting results. One of which was the Night and Day, but there were some other interesting watches that he ultimately produced as well. It's a little bit different from all of the other Gerald Genta watches that are floating out there, like the Royal Oak or the Nautilus, which are great watches, but of course they are much more standard, or at least much more well-known than the Gerald Genta brands themselves, and therefore this is a little bit more unique, especially if you don't want to break your budget going out and getting an AP Royal Oak, for example. Now, this clearly is not an AP Royal Oak. It is clearly not that level of horological quality or of history necessary, but it is interesting. Like I've said, this particular watch is available for sale, but also linked to other areas where you can get the watch if this one happens to sell. And otherwise, thanks a lot for tuning in. Let me know your thoughts about the Gerald Genta watch or any other watches you'd like me to discuss in the comments below. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts as well. And hopefully I see you next time too.